Nice. Okay, welcome to IFTA and IRP Basics. My name is Billy Pearson. I'm with the Idaho State Tax Commission. I'm a tax audit manager in the Fuels Tax and Registration Fee Audit Unit, and I'm based out of the Twin Falls Field Office. I've been based out of the Twin Falls Field Office for 22 years now. And today we're going to talk about what is IFTA and what is IRP, some of the licensing and registration requirements, how IFTA works, the record-keeping requirements for IFTA and IRP, how to file your IFTA return, and what happens if you don't file your IFTA return. We're going to discuss a little bit about audits and record reviews, and then resources that you can use in the future after the webinar. Our first topic is the International Registration Plan. So that's IRP, and it's often referred to as the plan. So it's a reciprocity agreement among 48 contiguous U.S. states, the District of Columbia, and 10 Canadian provinces. It regulates registering and operating interstate commercial vehicles, and it is where motor carriers register and pay one jurisdiction. The fee is based on the percentage of travel in each jurisdiction according to that jurisdiction's fee schedule. These fees are then distributed to the relevant jurisdictions. Actual distance is declared for the reporting period, which is the previous July to June for the recently occurring June 30th, except if your fleet expires June 30th, July 31st, or August 31st, which is the prior July to June reporting period, or often we refer to that as the base period. So like I said, the base jurisdiction collects and distributes the registration fees to the member jurisdiction where the vehicle operates. And a great resource for IRP and registering your vehicles, any type of vehicles, in-state, interstate, is the Idaho Transportation Department's trucking.idaho.gov. You can register your IRP vehicle there, and when you do that, you'll fill out the requirements form, and basically on the requirements form, it goes through the base jurisdiction, the established place of business, residency, distance reporting requirements, record keeping, and U.S. DOT requirements. And then on Schedule A, the application, it goes through your carrier information, weight information, and your vehicle information. And then Schedule B is actually where you report your actual distance in each jurisdiction. And if you have a new vehicle, you would use, or new fleet, you would use without any mileage in any jurisdiction. So it's like brand new with no history. You use the Idaho average per distance vehicle chart, that we call that the APVD chart. And another great resource for any trucking operation is the Transportation Department's Idaho Truckers Handbook, and that's also available on the trucking.idaho.gov. So that is an excellent resource for anybody that's trucking, or I see on the call here that we have several ITD employees and State Tax Commission employees, so that's just a great resource for any of us. I want to talk just a little bit about the IRP base jurisdiction. So when you select a base jurisdiction, the applicant may elect as its base jurisdiction any member jurisdiction where the applicant has an established place of business, the fleet accrues distance, and the records can be made or maintained and made available. If the applicant doesn't have an established place of business in a jurisdiction, they may designate a base jurisdiction from any member jurisdiction where they can demonstrate residency where they accrue distance, and where the fleet records are maintained or made available. To establish residency in a member jurisdiction, an applicant must demonstrate to the satisfaction of the member jurisdiction, so Idaho in this case, at least 3 types of requirements from Section 305, and that's Section 305 of the IRP plan. And IRP also has an excellent website that you can refer to. So if you're, for the established place of business, if you do not have that, then the residency requirements, the 3, include or could include your Idaho driver's license, and that's current Idaho driver's license, current Idaho Secretary of State filing, current Idaho personal vehicle registration, federal or state tax filings for the most recent year, current real estate or property tax assessments, current utility bills showing the service address, current property rental, lease, or mortgage statements, or other information that the Transportation Department might request. And while we're talking about selection of base jurisdiction and established place of business, we want to bring in that addresses associated with third-party licensing agents, virtual offices, rent and address service, etc., do not qualify. The business must be listed with the Idaho Secretary of State, the current filing, and the address of the declared physical location must be listed as the business address. So we have a lot of base, what we call base jumpers in IRP, so there are certain requirements. An IRP apportionable vehicle means any power unit that is used or intended for use in 2 or more member jurisdictions, and that is used for the transportation of persons for hire, or designed and used, maintained primarily for the transportation of property, and has 2 axles and a gross weight or registered gross vehicle weight in excess of 26,000 pounds, or has 3 or more axles regardless of the weight, or used in combination when the gross vehicle weight of such combination exceeds 26,000 pounds. Now let's move on to the International Fuels Tax Agreement. So IRP is registration fees, just like you register your car, and then we apportion those fees out to the member jurisdictions that you travel in. And IFTA is tax. So IFTA is a collection of tax agreement by and among 48 contiguous states and 10 Canadian provinces. So the difference between IFTA and IRP as far as the member jurisdictions is DC is not a member of IFTA. Some of the benefits for you as a licensee is 1 set of decals for each qualified motor vehicle to operate through all member jurisdictions. It's 1 tax return filed each quarter with Idaho in this case. It's 1 tax payment or refund. It's 1 audit, and I should say 1 joint audit because we do audits jointly for IFTA and IRP, so it would be 1 joint IFTA and IRP audit. And it also reduced administrative costs for you as the licensee or carrier. Back in the day, we used to pay each jurisdiction the fuels tax due. We registered in each jurisdiction. So these 2 agreements, or the plan, have brought this together to where you just have 1 base jurisdiction and you do your business through there for your activity, for your commercial vehicle. So the International Fuels Tax Agreement also assures that all member jurisdictions get their fair share of fuels taxes. Just like with IRP, they get their fair share of fees based on the miles traveled in that jurisdiction. So the base jurisdiction for IFTA is where your motor vehicles are based for registration purposes. So it's where your IRP vehicles are listed. So Idaho in our case, it's where the operational control and operational records of the licensee's qualified motor vehicles are maintained or can be made available, so that's just like IRP. Some travel is accrued or qualified by motor vehicles within the fleet. The commissioners of 2 or more affected jurisdictions may allow persons to consolidate fleets that would otherwise be based in 2 or more jurisdictions. So what is an IFTA qualified motor vehicle? An IFTA qualified motor vehicle is used, designed, or maintained for transportations of persons or property and operates in 2 or more member jurisdictions. And the qualified motor vehicle must have 2 axles and a gross weight or registered gross weight exceeding 26,000 pounds, or have 3 or more axles regardless of the weight, or is used in combination when weight of such combination exceeds 26,000 pounds or registered gross vehicle weight. Vehicles that do not qualify are recreational vehicles, motorhomes, pickup trucks, attached campers, business or buses used exclusively for personal leisure. So these programs are for commercial vehicles, so we do not want your personal vehicles in your commercial fleet. So when you're applying for an IFTA license, you complete the Idaho Motor Carrier application, and in this case, this is a unreadable Idaho Motor Carrier application, and you can find that on our website. The base jurisdiction will issue you a license and 2 decals. The decals are affixed to the side of the vehicle, and the license or cab card needs to be copied and put in the vehicle, and these expire each year on December 31st. So how does IFTA work? Like I mentioned, you get a cab card and decals from your base jurisdiction. So your decals will actually have your base jurisdictions state. The decals change colors each year, and they have a year on them. So they expire at the end of the year, and you'll get a new color. You file quarterly IFTA reports with the base jurisdiction, and you include all your distance accrued and gallons of fuel purchased by jurisdiction. Whatever you do, save your fuel receipts that you purchase in each jurisdiction, along with recording any trip movement that you have in all jurisdictions. So if there's just a basic netting of the fuel taxes for where the jurisdictions that your vehicle operate during the quarter, and then after you file the return, the base jurisdiction, or Idaho in this case, we transmit those fuel tax monies to IFTA Inc., and then they are distributed out to the other jurisdictions. And this is based on what you've reported for distance, the gallons of fuel that you've purchased, and your miles per gallon. So those are all really important numbers that go into the return to net out the taxes that go to the jurisdictions that you travel in, but you just file with your base state, which is Idaho in this case. And when it's all said and done, you may receive a refund, or you may owe, just depending upon the tax rates in the jurisdictions that you've traveled through. And you must file the IFTA quarterly returns as long as your license is active. So even if you have 0, you need to file 0 miles or 0 fuel, you still need to file, because those returns are required as long as your license is in standing. So we keep records in 2 different categories. We need to keep records for the distance and we need to keep records for the fuel. And we need to keep those for 4 years, or from the due date or the date that you filed, whichever is later. So distance record keeping requirements. This is a good example of a trip sheet. We want to show, you need to be able to show where your vehicle has operated, and it needs to be split out between the jurisdictions. And you need to also have summaries by vehicle and jurisdiction where the vehicle has operated. I'm going to go back just a little bit because I did skip over some of the mileage requirements, just looking at my screen. Okay. But I do want to go into that a little bit more, in a little bit more detail. So the mileage records that we want to look at in an audit situation would be that they need to have the unit number or vehicle identification number. They need to have the date that the trip started and ended. They need to have the trip origin and destination, so that's city and jurisdiction. That's not such and such farm because we don't know where that's at, or a name of a location that you dropped off of. It needs to actually have the city and jurisdiction, and then beginning and ending odometer or hub reading, and the total trip distance. We recommend taking jurisdictional odometer readings and recording routes of travel. And then we also want to see the fleet and the registration name on those mileage documents. So I did skip over that, sorry about that. And as time progresses, we see a lot more distance recording using telematics. So those are vehicle tracking systems. We also, there's mandates for electronic logging devices. The electronic logging devices are tracking the driver. So just be careful if you have an ELD. Those records are only required to be maintained for 6 months if you're using them for the log. And IFTA and IRP require that you keep those records longer. So if we go out to an audit, we could, in an IFTA audit, we would do like possibly 3 years. And in IRP, we would do 1 to 2 years of history. And if those breadcrumb trails are not available through your service provider, then you would be out of compliance because you don't have any backup for what you have filed, and we have no way to check that. So we do accept electronic records, and we will test those, and they need to have the routes of travel. So IFTA or IRP just passed a ballot where there need to be 10 or 15 minutes apart, and IFTA is in the process of passing a ballot where the pings need to be 10 minutes apart to qualify as an electronic record. So just make sure if you have one of those devices that it meets the requirements for IFTA and IRP, and that is beyond what the ELD requires for the hours of service. And then make sure you save that information. If you change companies or something, they a lot of times will purge it and then it's not available, and then if you get in an audit situation, you don't have the records to back up what you've reported. So for fuel, you need to specify the total gallons and the number of gallons purchased in each jurisdiction, and then that also needs to be summarized by jurisdiction and vehicle. And down here we point out to never use dyed diesel in a registered vehicle. There's no tax in dyed diesel, and it's actually illegal to use dyed diesel. These pictures are just a sting operation that we actually went on with the state of Montana, but Lolo Pass, and the sign, you can't read it, but it says all diesel vehicles. So they pulled in 60 different diesel vehicles and then tested them for dyed diesel, and then fines were assessed from there. So that is against the law, and do not put dyed diesel in your registered vehicle. And here is a great receipt sample for fuel. It includes the name and location of the retailer, the date of purchase, the fuel type, the number of gallons purchased, the price per gallon, the vehicle unit number, and the purchaser's name. So this is just a perfect example of what we would like to see in a fuel receipt. It's what's required for a fuel receipt. We do not accept credit card statements because they don't always give us all of this information, and all of this information is required to be considered a tax-paid receipt, and so you may not get credit if it doesn't contain all of those elements, which a credit card statement does not. We do accept fleet card statements with all of this required information on them, and we do encourage those in an audit situation. We would need those from your supplier. They can't come out of your bookkeeping system, but we can audit if they are sourced from your supplier. A little bit about bulk tanks. You need to have copies of the delivery tickets and showing that the tax was paid and which jurisdiction the bulk tank is located in. And a lot of times we'll have tanks that are across the border, so it could be a delivery from another jurisdiction, like maybe Utah into Idaho, or Idaho into Utah. So we need to know where which jurisdiction the tax was paid to, and where the location of the bulk tank is. And then you also need to keep track of your bulk fuel. I recommend this for anybody that has a bulk tank. Fuel is an expensive commodity, and it sometimes disappears, and you need to reconcile your tanks just for your own checks and balances. But you need to keep track of all the fuel that goes into your bulk and all the fuel that is dispersed out of your bulk for all the vehicles, qualified and non-qualified. And so the reconciliation will tell you where that fuel is going. And in an audit situation, it also verifies that you have enough tax-paid fuel to cover your qualified vehicles that you have reported. And the withdrawal logs for the bulk tanks and withdrawal logs are required. They need to have the date of withdrawal, the number of gallons, and the unit number associated with the withdrawal. Okay. So this is just an excellent summary report for distance and fuel. The distance is summarized here by each unit. The distance is also summarized by each jurisdiction. There's a total for each unit. There's a total for each jurisdiction. And then if you add up the total units and you come up with the total amount of distance, and if you add up the total jurisdictions, you come up with the same number. So it's important that you reconcile that information, and if you have odometer readings, it's awesome to reconcile those total numbers too. Fuel summary is the same thing. It's all the fuel that was purchased for all the units, and it's all the fuel that was purchased in each jurisdiction, and the grand total should add up for each truck and each jurisdiction. And then down at the bottom, it calculates the miles per gallon, which it takes the total number of miles and divides it by the total gallons that were purchased. And that's really what drives the IFTA return, is the miles per gallon, because that's what distributes out how much fuel you used in each jurisdiction based on the miles, and then that's how the netting of the fuel tax gets distributed to the various jurisdictions that you traveled in. So, filing an IFTA report, we have a link on our website that gives some samples. This is one of the samples that's down here that's kind of hard to read in the presentation, but that's a sample of a paper form, and up at the top you have the total fleet miles, so that's all the trucks in all the jurisdictions, and then you have the total fuel, so that's all the fuel that you've purchased in each jurisdiction, and then we do the math for that, and you calculate your MPG. And then down in the lower section of or the middle section of the return, it's each jurisdiction. You have the tax rate, you have the taxable miles, which they're taxable miles and the total miles for each jurisdiction should equal each other in most situations. And then you put in your tax paid gallons, and you calculate how many gallons you used in each jurisdiction, and then that nets out the amount of tax that is distributed to the various jurisdictions. So in the end, you may end up with a little bit of a deficiency, or you may owe a little bit, just depending upon the tax rates in each jurisdiction. But that's really the purpose of the return, is to net the taxes out to the jurisdictions. And if you don't like math, I suggest filing through TAP. TAP will do the calculations for you. Sometimes if you have a lot of jurisdictions, this form can be really intimidating, but TAP will tell you if you have an error, and it's just really simplifies it. So I would suggest signing up for that if you haven't already. Your return is considered received when you submit it electronically, or the post mark date if you're mailing it, or the date that you drop it off with the tax commission. Returns are due the last day of the following month at the end of the quarter. So first quarter, April 30th, second quarter, July 31st, third quarter, October 31st, and the fourth quarter is due January 31st of the following year. For any time there is holidays or weekends, then it's due the next business day. And like I said earlier, if you don't have any activity, you're still required to file. And then the monies that you owe would be to the base jurisdiction, and then we net those funds to the other jurisdictions that you traveled in. There are penalties and interest for IFTA. The monetary penalties include, if you file, it's $50 or 10% of the tax owed, whichever is higher, and that's to all jurisdictions. And the interest is a percent of the tax due each month until it's paid in full. And then non-monetary penalties, if you don't file, you could have your license suspended, and you might lose your license. And ITD can also suspend your license. They can suspend your registration, I should say. Okay. So we do audits. We do audits for registration fees, and we do fuel tax audits at the Tax Commission. And we do IFTA and IRP audits on behalf of all jurisdictions. So when we go out and do an audit, we aren't just representing Idaho, we are representing every jurisdiction that you have traveled in. And we also get audited by IFTA and IRP every 3 to 5 years to make sure that we are following the agreement and the plan. We might do audits simultaneously. We do IFTA and IRP audits hand in hand. We also do Idaho full fee registration audits, and we do Form 75, which is fuel use audits, and we do distributor audits at the Tax Commission. So that is the fuel suppliers that supply to your local like truck stops and vendors of fuel. We actually track every single solitary gallon of fuel that comes in and out of Idaho. We have a whole staff that does that. We partner with ITD, so the Tax Commission is contracted by ITD to do audits on their behalf for the registration fees, the Idaho full fee registration fees, and also IRP. So we look at your carrier history, and then we also compute the audit results through the ITD's system. But the audit packets will all be mailed from the Tax Commission. And as long as we're talking about that, if you have an amount due, it's important to make sure when you remit that it goes on 2 separate checks, because we are 2 separate agencies, even though we are doing the audits on behalf of ITD sometimes. The audit process for IFTA and IRP just involves us reviewing your records that you've used to support the distance and fuel that you've put on your returns. So a lot of times I just tell people it's like we are the teachers correcting your homework. So we are just looking at your math, and you have to show your work just like in school, and we're verifying that information to make sure that everybody is following the same set of rules and that it's fair to you and your and the jurisdictions that you travel in. And our goal is to ensure that carriers follow Idaho laws, federal laws, and we really want to educate for compliance. It's much easier to help you prior to an audit than it is giving you bad news in the end. So please reach out, and we would love to help you. This past year, IFTA passed a ballot to allow record reviews starting this past January 1st. We are starting to do a few of them, and IRP actually passed a ballot quite a while ago to do record reviews, but now we can do those hand in hand, and we just go through your record-keeping process in a smaller sample and suggest any improvements. And then it's intended to help you with your compliance, and it's similar to an audit, but there isn't an assessment associated with it. So you can reach out to the Tax Commission through the website. It's tax.idaho.gov, and there is a section in there that specifically deals with fuels tax, and our laws and rules are there. The IFTA licensing requirements are there. There's fuel consumer publications. There's frequently asked questions, and we just recently redid our website, so that is an excellent source if you have any questions. You can certainly go on there and hopefully find your answer. And this is basically our audit staff at the Tax Commission. We have a fuel tax audit manager in Boise, and then we have several auditors there. Most of the tax auditor ones are fairly new. We have several tax auditor 2s that have been there for several years, and a tax auditor 3 has been there many years. So we have offices in Boise. We have, Lewiston and Coeur d'Alene, and I think we have, I saw Michelle on here earlier. So everyone is happy to help you if we can. We also have offices in Twin Falls, Pocatello, and Idaho Falls. So reach out if you have a question. We may not always have the answers, but we can generally find the answers. I don't have any good jokes, so.
So does the truck being registered under AG change any of the reporting?
Is AG like as in agriculture?
Yep.
It doesn't change any reporting for IFTA or IRP.
Cool.
So, in fact, I'll just speak a little bit about what some people would consider off-road mileage. And on our IFTA return and for IRP, we want all the mileage included in there. So if you have, like, say, off-road miles or something, then you would come back and file a Form 75, which is our fuel use form, to get a refund on that tax money.
And then Michelle had a question. Because DC is not an IFTA member, are all carriers required to purchase permits to travel through DC or in DC? Because DC is not an IFTA member, are all carriers required to purchase permits to travel in DC?
I actually don't believe so, but I'm not 100% sure on that. You would report it on your return in the total miles for the fleet, but you would not calculate anything for the distance or for the jurisdiction itself. Thank you, Jerry. So Jerry Hunter is on here, and she is the Motor Carrier Program Supervisor. So she is an excellent contact at the Transportation Department. And she's only been there a few years, like 43 of them.
Okay. Then Katarina Schiller has a question. It says, I work for a leasing company. We have customers that file their own IFTA on trucks that my company has registered IRP under our name. I'm told that if we have an IFTA truck registered by us for IRP, we need to have trip logs to be IFTA compliant, even if we do not file the IFTA on that truck ourselves. And why is this?
Let me reread this.
It's a big one.
Okay, so the IFTA and IRP distance would go hand in hand. So in most cases, they're going to be the same. So whoever registered, okay, so if the IFTA is filed by one person, the IRP is filed by another person, they're still the same set of miles, so they'd still have the same record-keeping requirements. The person that is filing the IFTA would need to retain the fuel receipts, the tax-paid fuel receipts. Does that make sense?
Well, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so if you have an IFTA license and you only operate in Idaho, there's no need to have an IFTA license, because what the IFTA license is doing is netting the fuel taxes to go to the other jurisdictions. So if you file an IFTA return and you're only in Idaho, you only have one line on the return. It's all Idaho miles and it's all Idaho tax-paid fuel. So you would no longer need an IFTA license. So I would cancel that. And if you did go out of state, you could always get a trip permit. You'd have to get a trip permit for your registration portion of that, and then you could also get a fuel trip permit. So that would be a combination permit.
Cool.
Okay, and ProMile software, so I don't use ProMile software, but we would prefer that you enter the price in the gallons. That's just one more verification for the tax-paid fuel.
Cool.
Yes, go ahead and just write the vehicle number on the physical receipt. So if there's something missing on your receipt, go ahead and just fill in that information the best that you can, and that's acceptable. So if it doesn't have the unit number on it, we don't know if it went into a pickup truck, we don't know if it went in your commercial vehicle, we don't know if it went in the neighbor's vehicle. So we want to make sure that we have all of that information in there to verify that it's just going into the IFTA vehicle.
Well, we started off slow with the questions, but we picked up. Nicely done. Anything else? I don't see anything. So as some people have asked, I am recording this. So I will, once I get done recording it, I have to compile it, have to do a closed captioning. It's going to take me a couple of days. When I have that done, I am going to post it to YouTube, and I will send that link to everybody who's registered for this class in an email. And it looks like we have another question coming.
So to the person that's asking about Pro Miles, you actually, in all honesty, if you're putting all that information in there for IFTA, you're putting that information in there for you to compile the return. And what we are going to look at in an audit situation is we are going to have to see the actual receipt or statement from the vendor of the fuel. So it's nice to have all that information in Pro Miles because that gives you a summary of everything that went on with the fuel. But when we go to audit that, we have to verify it from the source. And so, I mean, I would recommend putting the receipts and all the information in there, but that isn't going to be something that's required because we have to see the source document.
Well, if nobody has any questions right now, let's go ahead and wrap this up. You do have the contact information. If you do have questions, feel free to use that, and we can get answers for you. I thank you all for attending this. I hope you got some information that's useful out of it. Thank you so much.
And that's all I have. I appreciate everyone spending your time with me today, and let me know if I can answer any questions.